and welcome to another episode of the Onigiri & Co podcast. Today, I am trying video again, so hopefully you're seeing this. And if you don't, I apologize. And we're welcoming my good friend and work colleague and FPV pilot, Raymond. You've put Raymond at the bottom. I didn't know if you were going to put like Space Rabbit or something, but you've put Raymond, so hi, Raymond.
I couldn't decide. I've got all these different social media accounts that I'm not really doing much with at the moment. So, Raymond, that's me. Hi.
Okay, we'll go with Raymond. If you're familiar with this podcast, Raymond has already come two times on the podcast. Once to talk about his debut, his beginning as a FPV pilot. The second time was about FPV and cinematography. And today we are talking about mainly the DJI Avata.
Avata.
No one actually knows how to pronounce this, so we're saying Avata. So yeah, I guess if you haven't heard episodes with Raymond yet, we're gonna introduce you again a little bit. So, would you mind talking a little bit about your background, how we met? Let's start with that already, and then I'll ask more questions.
Well, how far do you want me to go back?
I think anything that would be relevant to explaining to the audience your involvement in the visual industry.
Okay. All right. It's a loaded question.
I know. Your studies, I think, are relevant.
Yeah. What?
Your studies.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Studies. I suppose even in high school, I went to a pretty good high school that actually offered a subject called photography and digital imaging. So it was the only time in my life I ever did wet photography, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, it was like later on things transitioned to digital pretty quickly. So I never really did much like film photography. But anyway, so I topped the class in that, and there was also like video editing and stuff like that. I made a little short film, and so I did really well. And after school, I moved to, because I originally grew up in the country, so I moved to Brisbane and studied a diploma of screen and media and also a Bachelor of Interactive Entertainment, which is just a fancy way of saying games design. But I was more focused on the film side of things. I wanted to do animated film.
Yeah.
So after I left there, I did a bunch of freelancing. I worked at a post-production facility for a short time called Cutting Edge Studios, and then the financial crisis hit. That was so that must have been 2007 or 8 or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I lost my job there, and I just tried to freelance, getting any kind of work I could. So I dabbled in a bit of everything: graphic design, illustration, photography, video. But it wasn't until I moved to Melbourne in about 2013 that I started working in film and TV. So I worked as a camera assistant. Actually started more as a production assistant or a runner, and worked my way up into, I did a little bit of audio recording. So I was a sound recordist for a little bit, but I realized that my passion was really in the camera stuff. So I got in as a camera assistant, kept working my way up, worked on a whole bunch of commercials and short films and even some feature films. And then I got a job with Mishai, which is where we both work and how we met.
Yes, yeah. So that's a good long journey into visual and video making. You also have experience in making a short movie yourself called Mars, and now available, but we can talk about this at the end when you plug your thing.
Okay.
But that's why I'm always happy to have you on the podcast. And I know that it's weird because you're the first guest to be 3 times on the podcast, and you are mainly a video person and more a FPV pilot, but mainly you still have more years in the video than as a FPV pilot. But this is why I think your input in the podcast and on what we use and what we do and the future of drones and things like that it's something that I'm interested in, and I think is important to share, valuable to share. So my next question as background is, now can you tell a little bit about your approach with drones and your experience with drones? How did that happen in your life?
Well, I didn't really start working with drones until I started with Mishai, and And we actually had a drone operator there for a while, and I was the camera operator, so we
Yeah.
were using the Inspire 2.
Mhm.
So I was really getting a sense of like how the drone worked and how it flew, and eventually we ended up just getting our own drone. We started with the Mavic 2 Zoom,
Mhm.
and yeah, and we were able to do really well with that. And I just you just dive into the deep end, and I was literally just learning on the job, going out to these shoots. Like I did, sure, yeah, I did a couple of test shoots before our first proper job, but the first one we did was like at a copper and gold mine out in South Australia, which is really
Mm.
cool. Like beautiful, beautiful countryside out there. Um, and So yeah, really got to know it there. And then we also got the Mavic 3.
Yeah.
But then now we've been getting and the first time I did FPV was with yourself. So we went out and had a fly, and it was a lot harder than I expected. So
Yeah.
and you got so much cushioning when flying with a DJI
Yeah.
drone, but manual FPV that was a very steep learning curve.
Yeah. But did you feel like flying FPV with the drone that you were using? So my mini quad, it wasn't like a cinewhoop or anything like that. Did you feel more connected somehow to the experience and the flying and
Oh
more
yeah,
immersed? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I I think because I was still learning how to fly, I think all my focus was actually making sure I didn't crash, and so just taking it really steady. But once I got more comfortable, and like probably the biggest thing is uh, that I struggled with is I was still trying to fly it like a traditional drone, I guess you could say. So I was expecting to try and hover in place.
Hmm.
But the two things that really helped me move into the FPV world is literally forward momentum is so important. And I didn't realize that. It wasn't obvious to me. So
Yeah.
forward momentum pretty much all the time, and picking your lines.
Yeah.
And once I worked that out, I started thinking less about what I was doing with the controller and just enjoying the flight.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because I know you told me that once you knew you have to go forward, it was like almost, the unclicking. It was like, oh, clicking actually, and be like, yeah, I can do that. And it's sort of the same. I remember when I first flew in Central Desert, so I was less scared on crashing because there's nothing, right? It's the desert. um but I was also trying to bubble around, like to get my marks and be like, okay, now I'm gonna go left, and I would bubble, and then I'm gonna go right, and then suddenly I realized that as long as you decide to go a bit forward, everything is easier, and after a while you feel more and more connected to the drone. And without skipping ahead too much, I feel like the last time I saw you on the job flying the DJI Avata FPV, just my experience of seeing drones flown by people with FPV technology, I just looking at the drone, I was like, that's it. He is connected to the drone. He's the drone now. And I was so happy just to see it evolve in a space and not even having to ask you if you were comfortable or looking at what you were doing. Just looking at the drone going through gaps and up and down. And I was like, that's it. He's the drone. So yeah.
I just found it so intuitive when we did start flying with the Avata, because it really is the perfect blend between the manual FPV and just a traditional drone. So
Yeah.
it allows me to just hover there, have a look around. I'm like, okay, I know where I'm going now, and then I just go for it. But I think from the years of gaming as well, yeah, you're just so in the moment, and just having the goggles and just being just like you got no distractions
Mm.
around you, and I've got the support of you as my spotter to make sure that I don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just go for it, and I actually surprised myself. Like when I watched some of the footage back, I'm like, oh wow, I was really fanging it through those gaps. And
Yeah.
but
It's really good, and I can tell you were looking at the right spot and stuff. So that's why I'm in this episode, I'm interested in knowing, the progression of this, and we're going to talk about also for people who are interested in the avatar. Is it something that
Avata.
hobbyists hobbyists should use? Should they use the avatar, or is it something like? What is this for? What are the pros and cons? And it's good because now we have the opinion of the the hobbyist like me, and we have the opinion of someone who wants to create engaging vision. So it's a good thing. And I guess the first thing we need to do is to describe a little bit the equipment, because even if people fly drones and stuff, I don't know how much they have looked into the DJI Avata. So goggles to start with, because it's a little bit different than our FPV goggles. um, Obviously HD signal. And the good thing with that is that there's a head tracking option, and you've been using it heaps. So I was curious if you could describe the head tracking experience, because I haven't been able to use it much yet. Like how connected it is, like is it instant? Anything you can give us as your opinion on the head tracking with the goggles?
Probably the easiest way to explain it to someone that hasn't used the head tracking,
Mm-hmm.
it's like playing a console game where you've got and I actually that's mostly the reason why I use mode three,
Three, yeah.
because it's more familiar with a game controller.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine using the head tracking, it's kind of like if um, you're running forward, but then you want to strafe to the side, but so run to your side, but look out to a different direction.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. So I'm literally just like turning my head and looking up here. But you do have to be in two minds, because with the motion controller that you have in your hand, and you've got you've got a crosshair and a circle.
Mm-hmm.
So I can never remember which one is it that the circle is the direction you're flying.
I don't remember. I have a feeling it's
Yeah,
the
I think it
cross.
is. So, well, anyway. Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Let's
The cross is the middle of the screen, and the circle is
Yeah.
where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I have to pick my line, but I have to make sure that my circle is on the edge of screen,
Mm-hmm.
while my crosshair is looking in the direction that I want to with the camera.
Yeah.
So I'm actually like just darting my eyes back and forth, and just going, this is what I want to look at as I go past, but I'm also looking where I'm flying at the same time.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a trip, but you get used to it, and it allows you to do those orbits around things. And probably the only thing that I find is the drone banks. So as you look up, it kind of like tilts as well. So still, I don't. There's a setting in the drone that can keep your horizon line level. So that would probably fix that problem.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about the angle as you're flying around something.
Yeah.
But
Crabbing.
you might be able crabbing, yeah. And but I mean, if you flew with a controller, you can kind of level it out on your own, right?
Kind of. So, yeah, to be able to do an orbit, I feel like with the controller, for me, it's still the easiest way of doing it. But in outdoors environment in the past, because there was a bit of breeze, there's nothing you can do to level your drone anyway. When you try an orbit, you're a bit pushed. And I have a feeling that how can I explain? I feel like even with the controller, it wouldn't be perfect. It doesn't. The DJI Avata still flies like a cinewhoop. If we want to, compare it to how it flies, it will definitely not fly like a normal drone anytime soon because of the ducts. So it's more sensitive to what you said. As soon as you want to do a bit of an orbit with the momentum and the way air flows around it and everything, it will always be a bit on a sort of angle. What we didn't really explain is that, yeah, you're using the motion controller, you're using the joystick, or what other people call other names in the hobby. How does that work for you compared with the few times you've used sticks with my drone or even with the Mavics?
How does it compare?
Yeah.
I feel like the motion controller is just so much more intuitive.
Yeah.
Like it's just the motion of just rotating left or right and up and down.
Yeah.
and the drone does exactly what you would expect
Mhm.
with that kind of intuitive movement. So so much easier.
Yeah, it does look intuitive, and I have tried it myself. The only downside for me at the moment is because I am not used to moving that way, so side to side, up and down, and I'm used to just moving my fingers. Sometimes my brain is not ready for what the drone is doing because I'm not exactly doing what I wanted to do. Does that make sense? A bit like when you were learning with the sticks, you were doing an input and you were not too sure how this would translate in a drone movement. So this is
Yep.
what happens to me, and I am getting motion sickness because of that, because of the fact that sometimes I'm too rough, so I'm looking too quick to the right, too quick to the left, and then I'm like, oh my god, that's it, I'm sick. But I'm hoping that in the future I'll be able to use it, because I feel like for the Avata it makes sense to use the motion controller more than the radio controller. um, and then I don't know if I'll ever be able to use the headset, because I feel like it's a call for throwing up for me with with the tracking. But who knows? Maybe once I can fly a bit less hectically with the motion controller, maybe the head tracking will be a nice addition. At the moment, when I see you flying, and we watch back your footage, it really looks like you're flying. It's very organic, the look, and unfortunately we can't show any of our work that we do for Mishai, but we've been flying in projects. It's mainly construction sites, and it's so floaty and nice, floaty in a good way, because it looks like you know, if you're below a roof, for example, to show details of a roof, because you use the head tracking, you're flying forward, and then suddenly you just look up and you keep going forward, like you explained, and you look up. And for me, the best comparison I have to this is when I dream that I'm flying. So when I dream that my body is flying, this is how it behaves. And it's something that obviously I can't have with my mini quad, because the camera is fixed on it. So when I fly my mini quads, it's not really how I fly in my dreams, or what you recently did with the Avata, and that blows my mind.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that was a quick summary of how you fly it, how I probably fly it in the long term. Headset, head tracking, it's a very interesting technology that needs to be explored with drones, in my opinion. Now, should we talk a little bit about the drone itself and its capabilities?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because I feel like the camera, everything vision wise on it is pretty good. And then we'll talk about how it flies.
Yeah. Cool.
So, do you want to present the vision, the camera side of it?
Yeah. Well, considering that I've never, I actually don't have an FPV drone like a cinewhoop or anything myself with
Mm-hmm.
with the fixed camera, or even using it with a GoPro. Is what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah.
I've I've seen plenty of reviews on YouTube where they say the GoPro video quality is better than what the Avata does.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually haven't compared it myself because I've only ever just shot with the Avata, and in my opinion, it looks great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to the point where I'm actually really surprised at how much you can lift the shadows. So some of the environments that we fly in can be pretty dark,
Yeah.
um, and like in underground tunnels and things like that, and really can lift those shadows up. And it's still really clean. I assume they've got some sort of noise reduction going on there, but and that's at ISO 800. I
Yeah.
limit the ISO to 800.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then lift the shadows up in post. But I haven't tried 1600 yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it'd be a good test to do. But what was the question again?
It was more like, yeah, exactly what you said. The camera
Okay, good.
capabilities, the even the stabilization that is applied to the
Mm.
camera footage is pretty good, like the in-body stabilization.
Yeah. So we've tested it with that. So the max res is 4K 50 frames per second, which is really great to slow stuff down when you need to.
Yeah.
And I was going to say something else about the. Oh yeah, so yeah, the stabilization. So you can you can use the built-in stabilization on the the wide view.
Hmm.
But if you want to stabilize in post with gyro flow, then you have to turn off stabilization and just put it to wide view.
Yeah.
But we're getting really good results using gyro flow, and so I don't know. I because we talked about this the other day actually at work, and we're just like, I think it depends on what you're doing. Like some shots, I think it is better because you really want to get that super wide view for some shots if it's a tight space,
Yeah.
and just let it use its own stabilization.
Hmm.
But then there's other times when you might be doing lots of dynamic movements, and it's probably is better to stabilize in post. So
Yeah.
I guess it just depends on your use case.
Yeah, I have a question actually, because if you don't know, that's okay. Can you change these settings while in flight, or do you have to be landed to change this kind of stuff?
That's a good question. I
Yeah,
think you can while you're hovering. Yeah,
yeah,
you just hit the pause button and it hovers and
yeah. And the
change what you
reason,
need.
yeah, the reason why I'm asking this is because in the hobby, a lot of things we rely on the GoPro. Yeah, so when we want to show our footage, this is GoPro, and obviously, unless you're connected with your app or things like that, or you have a remote controller or something, most people in the hobby we land and then we make changes with the GoPro.
Yeah.
What I really like with the Avata, and then we'll talk about things we don't like, but at the moment I'm on the things that I like, is that recently I saw you change settings depending on the maneuver you were going to do. So, you're still in the air, I'm spotting for you, so it's safe, and you're like, okay, I want head tracking right now because the next move I want to do is with head tracking. When you're done, you're like, I want fixed right now, and you're just changing on your goggles because you see everything on your screen. I see what you're doing because we have HDMI export, which is great. um I find this, like, if people in 2015 had that with like our drones, would be like, wow, like this is amazing. We can get close to it, I suppose, with GoPros. But me as a person at the moment, because I don't have any accessories and I don't want to drain my GoPro battery, for example, when I fly, I don't have it connected to my phone. So I have to then
Right.
change things. And even, like you said, a stabilization off or on, depending on the type of shots you want to do. Because I think we realized recently that if we do a straight line forward, we might not need to put that in gyroflow anyway. We can just get away with on site having stabilization on, and it's plenty. And you could have super view, which is cool. Like you said, if we're flying in a tunnel or something, that's amazing. All of this is a lot of flexibility. You feel like you're really having different tools in the same thing without having to land and change stuff all the time. It's, to me, that's impressive.
How come you don't? How come you don't keep your phone connected to your FPV drones, like to your GoPro? Because your FPV drone batteries are pretty short. I mean, how long do they last before you have to land anyway?
My 3 minutes.
Yeah. So
It's
yeah.
it's
So why not just keep it connected?
For me, it's for battery on the GoPro purpose. So instead of getting maybe 45 minutes in total, I would probably be restricted in how long I can roll. But on top of that, I can't, even if it's connected, I cannot be flying and be changing options at the same time on my phone.
Yeah, right.
Like, I would need someone to
Why not,
help.
Noelle?
Or even if I had a controller for it, the GoPro remote controller, wouldn't really, I need the assistance of someone else. This is why I love when, as a pilot, you're really in charge of what you're going to do and your equipment, and you're like, okay, I want this right now. In the next 5 seconds, you can almost have a different drone. You can have stabilization applied and head tracking, and I find this pretty, it's a great idea, and I feel like it's pretty interesting. Now the drone itself can be up in the air for like 15 minutes, I think it is, per battery. Is that what it is? 10 minutes?
Yeah, I think roughly that. Yeah.
On paper, I think they say 15, but I feel like we've experienced more like a 10, especially outside or attacked by birds.
Yeah.
The prop guards are pretty good, and I think we can say that you had a few like oopsies that were not dangerous, because obviously you wouldn't be here talking about it if you had killed someone. But pretty resistant drone, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I hadn't experienced this before either, and I'm sure plenty of FPV flyers have, where you get a bit too close to a wall and decides to go sideways and go onto the
Yeah.
wall, and you get stuck there. And
Yeah.
then, because the first time that happened to me, I'm just like, I don't know what to do. I guess I just like let go of the trigger and it fell, and it only fell like a short distance,
Yeah.
and it was fine. Like it got a couple of little scratches. It was a concrete floor, but
Hmm.
um, and yeah, so I'm really conscious of trying not to get too close to walls because that's happened a couple more times.
Yeah.
But recently, probably the biggest one is magnets
Yeah.
in elevators.
We should talk about
So
this.
so we were flying around. Where there was lots of metal structure around, but there was some elevator shafts, and we were flying past the top of the elevator, and we didn't realize it at the time. We found out later that there are magnets in the top of those elevators. So yeah, that's what. And so every time I'd fly past it, suddenly I'm like getting drawn into it. I'm like, what's going on? And it's like we thought it was like a signal loss,
Yeah.
but no, and it makes a lot of sense because I was thinking about it just before we started the podcast. When I was flying the Inspire 2 and I was camera operator, my pilot was actually we did a shoot in a metal what do you call it, like a metal recycling factory. So there was like lots of scrap metal, and they were melting it down and creating raw materials from it for reuse. And but there was massive magnets that would go around this warehouse and pick
Shit.
up all of the trash. And oh man, the drone was just like, I don't know where to fly.
Wow.
So that was interesting, and he was sweating bullets that day, I tell you.
Yes. So it's funny that we realized later that it was the magnet and not the signal because it felt a bit like a tiny fail safe. Or what you were saying is like I'm drifting, and I'm like, oh, that can happen when there's a bit of breeze and yeah, well, drifting slightly. Um, so yeah, it's interesting that this happened, but now we know. And like you said, the suction problem is all cinewhoop with ducts, like the way the airflow goes in those ducts just act like a suction cup, so it just goes flat on uh
Well, I
well,
was surprised because the ducks are actually quite not very high. They're not very deep.
yeah.
So I wasn't expecting to get sucked onto a wall even with such low
Yeah.
ducks. So yeah, surprising.
Yeah, it is surprising. In terms of flyability, the ducts, I feel like you said, they're not big, so it's not the worst cinewhoop I have flown. But anything with ducts, to me, it's not my favorite thing to fly. But obviously what we do for work is not what I do around trees in the park. So I think like for what we do at work, it's pretty reliable, pretty pretty good. It's fast enough when we need it to be fast. But the thing that you can't expect it to fly like a 5 inch, which is what we use. Like recently at the park, I followed a little kid on a motorbike, and at no moment I felt like I was on track, on the course with my own drone, with my normal sticks controller. And after I landed, I'm like, I wonder how I would have done it if I had to follow him with the Avata and the motion controller. So it's the kind of thing that I'd like to do as a test. Like I'd like us, like you take a bike, you come with me at a park, and I do
Okay.
2 takes. I try to track you with my GoPro on my 5 inch and my controller, and then you do the same run around, and I try to follow you with the DJI Avata to see how much more flexibility I get. Because with the kid, I didn't do it because he was probably 6 years old. He was keen to be followed, and his parents said, "Yeah, yeah, no worries, you can do that. Send us the footage." Yeah. But I didn't want to orbit around him because I didn't know his reaction. The brain is not finished. So I'm like, I'm not gonna orbit him. I'm gonna stay maximum on the side, and I'm not gonna distract him. But with you, the test I would like to do is um, orbit you while you're moving, and see if I'm more comfortable. I would guess it's normal if I'm more comfortable with my setup, but how close I can get to my normal setup with DJI Avata and the motion controller would be interesting, or even the remote
Hmm.
controller of the Avata. So all of this to say, how do you feel about the flying for you? Like, do you like flying that drone? Because you don't really know better in terms of FPV drones anyway. So I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a real joy to fly. Like it's just so intuitive, and I think you you have to think less about your, like, I'm sure an experienced FPV pilot doesn't even think about the controls anymore.
Hmm.
But that's how I felt without having to really learn how to fly and pick my lines and do it all manually. I literally just get in there and just go for it and just enjoy it and just
Yeah.
be creative with it really really quickly and not
Yeah.
have to worry about the technical stuff as much. So yeah.
That's great. How about the times you flew a bit in the wind? Not crazy wind, obviously, but
Mm.
how did you feel with that drone?
Yeah. So it does. If it is a windy day, it definitely affects it. And the most obvious thing, like in terms of flying, it still flies fine.
Hmm.
You'll just notice if you're going into the wind, you'll be a bit slower.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is as soon as you're side onto the wind, your camera view will be really lopsided, and that can be, I mean, you're definitely going to lose because when you stabilize it in post, or if you want to just rotate and get the horizon line level or whatever, you're definitely going to have to crop in and lose some resolution. So yeah, the wind can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay.
the flying experience I feel like is a bit less enjoyable, which is the same in high wind for our drones anyway. But I feel like the safety is pretty good because it's funny how,
Hmm.
as a pilot for a long time, I had 50% of trust in DJI products and 90% of trust in my products because of past experience. I told you that my Mavic One in France just fell from the sky, and now I believe it was a battery connector issue or something like that, but they replaced it for free, and I'm like, it was out of warranty, and I'm like, hey, this must be a reason they're
Oh wow.
buying my silence. So yeah, because it was I don't know if it was technically out of warranty, but I bought it secondhand, so I wouldn't have any benefit from warranty and stuff like that. So yeah, the people bought my silence, and since that day I was, even on site with Mavic 2, Mavic 3, Mavic 3 not anymore, but Mavic 2, I was a bit skittish. I was like, I'm always scared that this is going to drop from the sky and there's nothing I can do about it. There's no warning. Whereas my drone needs a good reason to fall from the sky because I build it the same way all the time. And pretty much if it takes off once, it will always take off. You know what I mean? Like if I maintain it properly. Um, but with the Mavic 2, another time, like the video recording um, didn't work for me. And I think I have figured out why. It's because at the time I had a sort of magnet at the back of my phone, and you know how you fly them with your phone, the Mavic 2.
Yeah.
I have a feeling maybe that's what happened. It interfered,
Interesting.
it confused the controller buttons and signal. I don't know. As long as this drone stayed in the air, I was happy. But, I didn't like that. But since we have the Mavic 3, I'm a lot more comfortable. And then again, when we got the DJI Avata, I was like, I'm gonna judge hard. I didn't want to, but I was like, okay, let's see what it can do. And because the whole year that we spent before getting approved officially to fly FPV and getting the Avata, I was on my end working with different cinewhoops. I was like, I really don't like cinewhoops. I have nice people who send me cinewhoops for me to try, and I've tried them, and it's not awful. But my drone,
Hmm.
I rated 100 out of 100. Cinewhoops that I've tried, if you add the fly time, the way it flies it, and everything, it's the best one is maybe a 60 out of 100. Whereas to me, at least the DJI Avata, we've hit stuff a little bit. We fly for 15 minutes. We don't have to have GoPro. For me, that's at least 80 out of 100. So
Yeah. Good.
um, it's
And the signal
it's quite
strength
good.
is amazing.
That was the next bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about the signal strength. So we have done last week. I recorded an episode about HD systems in general with two other friends who tried different systems. And we said that the main problem with the systems we put in miniquads at the moment is delay. And also, when you lose signal, it just freeze or do a black screen depending on which system you use. And that's terrible because you're flying. Whereas, with analog, when you start losing vision, it might not have happened to you too much because you haven't flown analog too much, but it goes fuzzy a little
Yeah.
bit. So you have warnings. But I have a feeling that we never had any issue with the DJI Avata and the signal.
Only once.
Okay.
Just in our last shoot, I
Mhm.
got a slight glitch in the image, but there was so much steel and concrete between where I was and it, and yeah, that I only noticed and that's the only time I've noticed it in the last handful of shoots that I've done, or every shoot that I've done with it so far. So I've got full confidence in it. I feel like I kind of know what my limit is now. I really did. I have been. I probably got a bad habit of really pushing the limits.
Yeah, but we're safe.
I'm sure I give. I'm sure I give my boss a heart attack every time I say how much I pushed it. But no, it's good to push those boundaries and creative boundaries.
Yeah. And so in your goggles and on my screen, it's HD the whole time. There's no time that we get any pixelated on the side because that's what happened with old systems. The first DJI FPV system I put in my drone, you would get pixels on the side. So it wouldn't be really HD anyway. And I wonder, is it 720 what we see on the screen? Do you think? I
I'm
wonder
not
what it
sure.
is. I wonder
I
if
have
they
to fact check
say,
that one.
I'm just quickly having a quick look.
Yeah, cool.
Let me check. But yeah, so
Ask me a question in the meantime while you're looking
yeah,
it up.
what I could ask you is, and there's no delay in the signal. You feel pretty connected. Like when you turn with your motion controller, you feel like the drone is turning straight away. Or
I haven't noticed any delay. Like I don't notice it at all. Like I just feel like it's yeah, I'm really in the moment, and I I don't honestly I've never experienced any delay with flying FPV in like I because I
Mhm.
don't have a huge amount of experience like yourself.
Yeah,
So I don't even know what delay looks like and how that affects your flight, to be honest,
it's to give
because
you
I
an
haven't experienced it with the Avata. So
yes. I found the resolution. It's 810p at 120 fps apparently, and they say the latency
810p, 810.
810. I don't know. That's a bit weird, isn't it? It's a
Well, yeah, I guess that's just a bit higher than 720p. So yeah, it's a bit higher than 1280 by 720, I guess. Because
mm,
if 810p is the vertical height,
yeah,
then yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
There's different information. They also said 1080, and then it depends on the frame per second and also different latency. They said the higher latency is 40 millisecond and the lower latency is 28 millisecond. 40 starts to be heaps. 28 is acceptable. To give you an idea,
Hmm.
when we talked about this in a previous episode that was comparing analog and digital, with the when pilots started flying analog cameras, um, they were like security cameras that you would strip naked and put on the drone, and latency was terrible because it was not optimized. People had not developed proper system yet, and as people reduced latency by changing sensors, or changing the technology, we got better video transmitter as well on the drone. People were like, oh wow, I could never go back, because for example they would have a newer drone and an older drone. They would fly the new drone, maybe break a motor, grab the spare one and be like, oh shit, I feel like it is not reacting like it's supposed to react. I don't have this instant connection with my drone anymore. And you can get used to latency when it's a fixed latency. So if it's
Mm.
always the same millisecond behind you, then your brain knows there's a delay, you get used to it, and you can stop noticing it. The problem that happened with the first DJI system that came out that we put in our drones is that the latency not only was bigger than our analog system, but it was variable. So sometimes you would have this amount of millisecond behind, and then it would be more later, depending on how far you would fly from yourself or if there was something in between. So you could never get used to it. And all you would notice is that, shit, it's not doing what I'm expected. And people were just being a bit thrown off. And it's still happening with the current system I have. I don't have the latest DJI FPV equipment, but what I have in one of my drones, I still don't feel really good. I will fly it and I feel a bit like I'm holding back because I don't know first if that tree is exactly where it is or if I'm physically closer to it. And also I don't know when it's going to catch. And to give you an idea, the other pilots in that episode were saying it was the same for them. The thing that for having flown the Avata, I haven't felt that uncomfortable flying the Avata in terms of delay. So I'm surprised.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, just going back to the screen resolution. What did you say it was?
Well, I've seen on specs, if you look at live view quality and latency, there's two lines. There's one that says 8010p and then the other one says 1080p. Sorry.
So is the goggles too?
Yes, there's with DJI. So we use the FPV goggles, or do we use the goggle too? I don't know which one we use. Hold on. Let me quickly.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm just Googling this quickly. DJI FPV goggles. No, we're using the DJI goggles too, I believe. Yes.
In that case, yeah, it's definitely 1920 by 1080.
Yeah. This one is 1080, 100 frame per second, and the latency is 30 milliseconds. So, I don't even have the DJI FPV goggles V2. I have the V1s. And, what I said with the latency, I have a feeling that if my latency is about 40 milliseconds with those old goggles, it's probably a bit too much. Whereas I feel like ours is more around the 30 marks. And it's a good question because people also said the human eye and brain shouldn't be able to see that difference. But we do. So I don't know. It's very weird. And what I said in the previous episode is, how I get a bit sick flying HD? I was saying maybe my brain sees the delay. And because, when you get motion sickness, it's because your brain is a bit delayed compared with your input. So it doesn't match the inputs of the body. And I'm thinking maybe because I'm so used to flying and having instant reaction or almost, because it's not really happening, my brain gets sick and I get motion sickness. It's only a speculation.
It's weird because I don't get any motion sickness when flying drone or even some of the helicopter jobs that we've done where I'm hanging out the side of the chopper looking through the monitor, the camera. Yeah. But if I look at a screen and I'm in a car as a passenger, I'll get sick. So I don't know how that works, but
I don't know. I get super sick doing that in cars too, but the only thing I don't get sick with is flying analog FPV live. So,
Is it just something you've gotten used to?
I don't know, because if I watch back on the screen, depending on if I have eaten or not, if I'm thirsty, or not, I can get sick rewatching my GoPro footage. So I don't know. It's so
maybe you're allergic to digital.
Anything that's digital, maybe. But yeah, it's just to conclude on this.
Actually,
yeah.
What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to fly analog, but also shoot analog. Did you see that video the other day of someone put a Super 8 camera on their FPV?
No, I didn't see that.
So good. I'll have to send you a link.
Yes.
Have you got show notes? I'll find the link, and you can if I can find the link, chuck it in the show notes so people can check it out. I'm pretty sure it's an Australian guy too that filmed it. So
okay.
It's really cool because it's like really old school looking grainy footage and real rough because it's 8mm Super 8 film.
Wow.
Yet it's with the style of FPV. It's an interesting combo. So,
yeah. I want to see that. It would be fun. You can't stabilize this, obviously, in post.
Let me see if
You put the tape in gyroflow or something. You're like, God, stabilize this. I guess.
Well, you don't have to worry about rolling shutter in that case, though. So it's like,
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, if you can find it, send it.
I want to see if I can just find it quickly now while we're chatting, just because I reckon it's worth giving a shout out to that guy who's done it.
Oh, I'm not even surprised it's an Australian person ID, to be honest. If you find it, let
I found it already. So it's Jace Film.
Jace Film.
Does that ring a bell?
Is it on Instagram?
I found this YouTube video. If someone just searches Super 8 on a drone, that's what the video's called, and these channels called Jace Film.
Jace Film. Noted.
But it looks like he shoots all kinds of film stuff. He's got some really interesting videos, like astrophotography, and check it out. It's super cool.
Cool.
So if someone out there knows Jace Film or anything, then maybe you could do an interview with him. I'd be really interested to hear what he has to say about it.
Okay, I'll try to find him. That's a good suggestion, and I'll put the link in the show notes so everybody can see what we're talking about. If you hear weird noises, it's my dog. Yeah.
Oh right. Yeah.
Just saying.
That's right. Sorry. Just. I was going to say before, it's raining here at the moment, and we got a really noisy downpipe. So if you've heard dripping, I'm sorry. That's just me. I'm a drip.
You're a drip.
Dad joke of the day. Here we go. There's always one.
Yes.
Not even a dad.
With you, yeah.
Actually, so I just quickly, are you going to post? I mean, we're recording this. You're going to upload this to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just quickly, I can just share my screen and show you this Jace. I'll give you a little preview. So whoever's watching on this episode on YouTube, can have a quick look.
That's a good idea.
So, all right, so just give me a sec. All right, full screen. Can you hear the audio as well?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, cool. I feel like, are we going to watch the whole thing?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the whole thing. We'll just at least until the first few seconds of the actual footage.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It is rad what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
And the music's perfect. How good is that?
Oh my God.
I'm sorry for anyone that's listening to this on just audio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pause and
That's
go check
so
out the
cool.
video and then come back.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I didn't realize he had a 360 camera on there as
well. My God, we see the result as well.
It's so cool.
It is.
It looks like, it reminds me of a low budget 70s film, but shot from a helicopter.
Yeah. Oh, we should do it.
We're gonna shoot analog. It's like I stuff all this digital. We're allergic to digital. Here we come, analog, full analog.
It makes me emotional.
All right, I'll pause it there. Anyway, go check it out.
It's awesome. Thanks for sharing it.
So good.
I loved it. It was so cool. It's a lot more cooler than I expected. So.
Anyway, that's how you fix your motion sickness. Super 8 all the way.
I was going to go on a tangent, but you know what? I might not, and I will try to get the guy on the podcast, and then I can ask him all the questions instead of trying to guess he. So let's go back to the Avata, which seems a lot less cool now.
Squirrel. Bit of a tangent.
Yes. We're actually getting towards the conclusion because I feel like we've talked a lot about, how it works, what we like about it. Don't get me wrong. I still feel like as a hobbyist, if I want to go to a park, I'm still taking my own drone. I'd be curious to see, Raymond, in the long term, if you fly more 5 inches or stuff like that with us, with James and I, for example, if you prefer to take that or the Avata. But I guess at the moment we don't know, and we only know my opinion. So if we had to talk about a beginner, because in the previous episode we recorded with friends, it was like sometimes we get DMs or people asking, I want to get into the hobby. What would you recommend? Do you recommend digital, analog? In this episode, I'm more interested in your opinion. What do you think? Which types of beginners should get an Avata? Is it more beginner in video creation, video editor, or could someone who's just dreaming of flying, would it be beneficial for them to get the DJI Avata? Because I have my opinion, but I want yours.
I think if it's someone that has flown traditional kind of drones or someone that's completely new to drones, I think it's perfect for either. Because if you've flown traditional drones, it's not a big leap to go with the Avata because you still have those the fail safes of being able to hover or hit a pause button, you just hover. But when you want to go FPV, you can just go for it. For someone that has never flown a drone before, you can actually get the benefit of both worlds in the one drone. You can fly it because you can do things like I mentioned before and unlock the horizon line and make it look and feel like a traditional drone. But it's also a lot smaller and compact, so it is something you can take on a trip and traveling, and you can fly it traditionally or full FPV. So I think it's like the best all rounder. It's it's awesome. But I mean, even someone that is like a actually, I'm not gonna comment on someone that's like a hardcore FPV pilot. So I'll let you answer that one. Would you recommend like a fully experienced FPV pilot?
So I would only recommend it in the professional world. So right. I'm like, and it depends again on the personality. So if you're someone who loves building your drones and it's your business and it's the main activity of your business, you probably would be better off building your own cinewhoop. Again, you know, like professional gamers who build their own computer for what they need to do, you know, with the graphic cards they need and stuff like that.
And I'll add that's the third main point is if you just want to have the enjoyment of just going and flying, then you don't have to worry about building any drones or anything. The equipment's just ready to go. So that's a no-brainer as well.
Yeah. So
and for someone that doesn't have the time to build their own as well, like I'm the sort of person that just wants to get creative and not have to worry about the technical side of things. Like I went down the rabbit hole of it was a short tangent, but I went down the rabbit hole of anamorphic lenses and the anamorphic projector lenses that you adapt to your camera to get the anamorphic look. And but there are all kinds of accessories and diopters and 3D printed adapters that you might need, and you end up just spending so much time researching and sourcing gear, and it can get expensive. But if you're just someone that wants to get creative and get flying, then Avata is amazing for that.
Yes, and that's also my opinion on this, because I've always struggled. I'm more the person who wants to film things when I want something beautiful, but I also like my normal drone when I want to do something stupid, you know. So, and I feel like a lot of people in the hobby, they also like the flexibility of how the 5-inch fly, because let's be honest, you couldn't do what Mr. Steel does everywhere, like, you know, zigzag and stuff. Like it's not as fast. It's still not as agile, you know, or there's another word for it that is escaping me right now. Nimble in space than what we fly with. So I think it's only if someone was really experienced and wanted a quick solution, they would probably use an Avata. If they don't want to build and buy their own cinewhoops and spend time on it because reasons, like I felt like for Mishai, because we do more things than just drone, it's really good for us because it gives us the best of all worlds. Like you said, we don't have to build it. We sure it's on an industry level, so it's always going to react the same way. It's insured, it's warranted, like everything is professional. Whereas sometimes with cinewhoops that I would have built myself, you don't get all the benefits, because I build it, and it's a lot of pressure on me as well to make sure everything is working all the time the same way, which is not always easy. And also, I still feel like, again, because the Avata is a cinewhoop, it's a bit hard to compete in terms of flight time and everything at the moment. But and that hurts me to say, because something I need to say in this episode is I don't really like DJI as a company. If we start talking about ethical problems that they create, you might not be aware of it, but there's a lot of ethical issues raised by the brand DJI. But at the same time, they are one of the leading brand in the industry, so a lot of people rely on them for new product and reliable product and things like this. So one of the solutions would be ideally more competition on the market and more choices for us to choose from. But unfortunately, it's not happening. So considering all this, I personally would only advise the Avata to someone who's a bit of a videographer, a bit of a photographer, and also wants something a bit more spicy than a Mavic. A bit more like, I can have fun too if I want, So that's the only people I would advise that to. If anyone saw my videos, or other FPV pilot videos, and come on Instagram and says, I want to do that too, that wouldn't be the first thing I would advise them to get. I would tell them, if it's for fun, just still do what I do. And if you really want HD, then there's several systems now you can choose from. But I would still tell them analog is a bit better. So that's the conclusion. But I feel like it sort of matches your opinion on it. Yours was for creative people mainly. It's perfect for creative people, let's be honest.
Yeah.
What should the Avata be used in general for? Was my last question, but I feel like we sort of answered it. It was the professional world and a bit of fun. Do you think of any application? Trimming the grass.
Free haircuts.
Free haircuts.
What else? I love questions like this because it gets my creative brain going. It's like, how can we use it differently? I saw another FPV video online just the other day, and I'll see if I can find a link for it as well. I love it when they use it like a steady cam. So they'll be holding it and walking through a scene, and then they'll take off and you'll get like a bird's eye view, and then you come back down. And and this video that I found is like a perfect example of that. And it shows you what they actually shot and the behind the scenes. So I love that sort of thing. So that's something we should experiment with.
Yeah.
And see if we can do it with the Avata safely. That's the trick. I mean, you don't want to give yourself a free pedicure either. So.
No, manicure or pedicure. I could try with my feet.
Manicure or pedicure?
Pedicure.
Is pedicure the feet one?
Yes.
We're just catching the drone with our feet.
extra challenge. The look on site would be, what are they doing? We have safety boots though, so maybe it would be better to catch with the feet.
They're steel caps, so I think we'll just like kick it out of the air.
Kick it in the a quick foodie kick. Oh, yeah. I'm glad you answered that. It's probably something to consider because in the past it was hard to do on film sets. They do that with giant drones that have like 8 motors and there's someone grabbing it. But now you can almost, if your hand is flat, you could almost take off from my hand, and stuff like that. So it's pretty good.
Well, actually, this video that I just mentioned, the example, they basically had just a little, kind of like a little tripod kind of a thingy, just a little handle on the bottom of the drone.
Sorry, I love that you have a tripod randomly.
Well, I was gonna set my microphone up on it earlier, but then I found a better solution. So.
You're such a video person that you have random tripod. Anyway, sorry, I had to say it.
I've got a little small HD monitor.
Nice.
What else do I have here? I've got a little Stargate SG1.
I thought that was something else.
Noelle.
Sorry, I just said, what is this? Is it a Stargate floating pen? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like magnetic. It just sort of floats there.
Oh shit, that's really cool. You're so sci-fi as well.
Oh, I want to build this whole office that I have here into like a real full-on sci-fi thing. I've got this. Oh, like as some people might know, I've got my YouTube channel, which is Space Rabbit,
Hmm.
and I've always wanted to really like do a sci-fi themed channel.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just a matter of finding the time. I've banged on about it a lot with you, and
Yeah.
just finding the time.
Yeah. Well, actually, maybe we can finish the podcast around this topic a little bit about the short movie, where we can find it.
Oh,
You know, if you want to advertise a bit now that it's out and now people can watch it, because last 2 episodes people couldn't watch it
oh
anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, I suppose that's another link I can give you for the show notes.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. But otherwise, you can find it on the Dust YouTube channel. So I was lucky enough to be have the film accepted onto that, and that was honestly like my main goal with that film when I first started. Just because it's, if you're not familiar with Dust, it's a YouTube channel dedicated to sci-fi short films.
Mhm.
It's awesome. So go check it out. And so yeah, if you look up Dust Mars sci-fi short film, you should find it, or even include the word Space Rabbit as well.
Mhm.
Because having such a generic name for a short film, just Mars,
Yeah.
it's like yeah, good luck trying to find it if you just search for that. But yeah. Anyway, so so they released it on Valentine's Day, which is actually quite fitting because it is a bit of a meet cute
Mhm.
story. And it's been doing really well on the platform. I mean, they've got millions of subscribers, but already the film is done in the last 3 months. It's done, I think the last time I checked it, 87,000 views.
Nice.
So pretty stoked with that. I'm very proud of that short film, and a shout out to anyone that worked on it. Yeah, massive thanks to them, because we it really came together, and it was, yeah, so proud.
Yeah, it's a great short movie. Yeah, a little bit of tease. It's a great story.
Oh, and I also won a couple of awards with it as well. So
exactly.
Canberra Short Film Festival and the St Kilda Film Festival both got Best Editing, and
Nice.
it was also nominated for Best Director and Writing as well. So
Yeah.
stoked.
Very nice. Congrats on this. I'm so glad it's finally out there and people can watch it. You should do some Blu-rays. The reason why I'm saying that is 2 episodes ago we had someone who released a whole documentary about FPV, and for a long time it was on Blu-ray and nowhere else, not on streaming platform. And we were like, why did you go for Blu-ray instead of streaming platforms? And then we got the answer. And if you don't know the answer and you're listening to this episode, you should go listen to the episode with Joshua Bardwell. But that's why I said you should put it on Blu-ray as a joke. Well, thanks for coming today, Raymond. As always, it's a pleasure. You're actually going to work soon, tonight, so I have to free you.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on, and the fact that I've hardly flown any FPV, and this is the 3rd episode you've had me on, so thank you. Thanks for that. I'm chuffed.
I like it, and also, it's not just because of your video experience, background, film director. It's more also the fact that I can tell you're really good at flying, becoming an FPV pilot. You are the fastest person I've taught flying, and I've barely taught you anything. And I think it's part the equipment, but also a lot the person you are. You are really good with space awareness. You're really good with coordinated movements, and you have your creative vision on top of that. And for me, it's like I didn't want to say predator. What do you call it? The not a predator, but like the apex. You know, like the the really good people. I mean, good at what they're doing. So it's been impressive. The last shoot was...
Well, I had a good teacher as well.
I'm gonna take credit more than I should because my ego, but I feel like it's been amazing to see you progress and become a proper FPV pilot. The last shoot we did at work together was mind blowing. And
Cool. Thank you.
yeah, I'm really happy. It makes me happy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching, hopefully, this episode. If you like the podcast, please give us some good ratings wherever you listen to this podcast. It should be available on almost all podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everything. So if you want to support the podcast, you can do that, or you can share it with your friends and family who might be interested in the topics we talk about. We also have a Patreon. So if you want to support the video format of this podcast that I have to subscribe and pay for, go to the Patreon, and that's pretty much it. We will see you or talk to you in 2 weeks time, and in the meantime I wish you some happy flying. All right, bye.